And then I think it took some real distance and like grief, truly, of like the end of that chapter of my life, to then be like, oh, no. It was so much more special than you ever realized.
This is Good One. I am your host, Jesse David Fox, senior writer at Vulture and author of Comedy Book. My guest today is Ed Helms. We talk about The Office, the Hangover movies, and the process and stories behind some of the funniest, most well-known comedy scenes of the 21st century. Ed also shares the story of the one time the U.S. government considered blowing up the moon, which is true, and you'll have to wait to see what that means. So, here is Ed Helms. I am here with Ed Helms. Thank you for joining me.
I'm so glad to be here.
So this show is really interested in the comedic process, and I'm specifically interested in how someone creates and evolves a comedic character, which you've done throughout your career. But I want to focus first on sort of the two most iconic versions of doing this. So let's start with The Office. You were a fan of the British version and then the American version. Before you ever were on the show, what were you seeing in the American version that you thought was exciting to you?
Well, no, first and foremost was Steve Carell, who I knew from The Daily Show. I had been a fan of Steve's on The Daily Show, and then I was fortunate enough to become a cast member on The Daily Show, and I overlapped with Steve for not long, like a couple of months, really. But I knew him, and I knew his work well. And when I heard that the British Office was coming to the United States and that Steve was going to be the David Brent character, I was like, that's a home run. That is going to be so good. So I was enamored with the show before it even took to the airwaves. And I was in that first audition round. I think I auditioned for Jim or Dwight. Didn't get it, whatever.
Yeah.
Show takes off. It's fantastic.
So what did Greg Daniels, the creator of the American version, tell you initially about Andy, and how did it evolve through your conversations before you even shot anything?
I was invited out to just sort of have a conversation with Greg at a certain point. And I remember I went up to the writers' offices, and I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if it was just a general meeting, if maybe Greg had another show in the works. So I'm not reading too much into it. But I get up there, and Paul Lieberstein, who was kind of a lieutenant, like I don't know what his title was, but he was one of the top writers. He and Greg sort of sit me down in one of the offices and just start kind of they're so just transparent and candid. They're like, hey, we're thinking about this storyline that involves a character who's like a Connecticut yacht club kind of douchey. Mm-hmm. And I started kind of riffing like, oh yeah, and maybe he's also this, and wouldn't it be funny if this, and yeah, he wears pants with like little like those J. Crew pants with lobsters on them, or little sailboats, or the belts with sailboats on them, and he kind of like dresses in pastels, and he's someone who makes you laugh from a distance, but like up close, like you can't kind of stand him. I don't know. All that stuff was emerging in a very sort of fun, pitchy, organic chat.
Yeah.
And then they're like, all right, cool. We'll let you know if anything happens.
So at first you start off in season 3 in the episodes where Jim goes to the Stanford office. And primarily the sort of joke engine for your character is the sort of incessant annoyingness. And I'm curious, how do you play someone who's obnoxious without them actually being too annoying that the audience is annoyed at the person?
Well, I think that's a trap. Like, I would never think of it that way.
Yeah.
I only thought of it as like, what makes me laugh about Andy? And it was like the temper, like his volatility that always made me laugh. And like kicking the trash can in one of those first episodes was like a very character defining moment. And then the outburst we had over Call of Duty, where he started screaming like "saboteur" at Jim. There's that amazing misdirect that the writers worked in, where Chip calls us into the to the conference room, and he's like pissed off, and you think it's because we've been playing too much Call of Duty, and it's because we're not performing well at Call of Duty, which was such a brilliant, just misdirect scene.
All right, Jim, are you using the MP40 or the 44?
Sniper rifle?
Snipe what?
I want to watch a clip with you. So to set it up, Andy's initial arc builds to the 14th episode of season 3, The Return. For those who haven't seen it in a while or don't remember, the episode is the first 2 acts of the episode. You are annoying Steve Carell's Michael Scott by sucking up too much, essentially. And you're annoying everybody else by singing constantly and just sort of being Andy. The other thing to set up this clip, which I'm sure you know which clip I'm going to play. At the start of the episode, you show John Krasinski's Jim that you created your own cell phone ring, which is a 4-part harmony of Rockin' Robin.
Which I recorded on my laptop for the show.
As a prank, Jim hides your phone in the ceiling and keeps calling it. So this builds to Michael flat out rejects your friendship and the moment where you all explode and punch the wall. You get the script for this episode. Do you remember what you thought of the scene and how you decided you wanted to approach this moment?
Well, the first time that we as a cast would see a script for an episode was at the table read. So everybody's sort of reading a script cold at a table read. And honestly, at that time, I was just so psyched to have scenes. Like I was so psyched anytime I'd get to have like a standoff with Michael Scott or some funny little whatever. It was just such a thrill. So I'm sure seeing that was just totally exciting.
So then how did you then think to approach that moment where you have to play the sort of building up of rage or explodes?
Part of Andy's game was you said anger. I think it's volatility. It's sort of like the tinderbox and the need to kind of like try to keep things calm. So there's like a boiling underneath, and the denial, the repression, the inability to like actually acknowledge the truth of a moment.
Yeah.
Which is kind of something I think I grew up with in my home. Like punching the wall and then immediately just being like, y'all good? You need anything from the break room? That to me, that's I understood that.
Yeah.
I knew that. And I think I'm grateful that I can see why a real person like that would actually be horrifying and tragic. But in the context of The Office, it is so funny.
Yeah. I mean, you could see you're able to carry him where at all times you could feel like a heaviness in his face behind his eyes, which I think is the signature of that performance, where it's like at any moment there's this sort of thing that he's battling with.
Yeah.
And so you can tell that all of his conversations are a performance of him like not actually saying whatever he's thinking.
Absolutely. Andy always wants to be a good guy, but he has so many demons and he doesn't have the sort of like self-awareness or all the sort of editing mechanisms that keep us like socially acceptable to other people. Andy is constantly battling those things.
What's it like to see it? There's just things that you notice because in the moment you're probably just acting it, but like even watching it, do you pick up on certain things about what you did in the moment?
You know what I'm seeing when I watch that? I get chills because I'm just remembering how fun it was. Like what a thrill. What a unbelievable opportunity that was to just have that much fun with those incredible people. I really was clocking, and as you played it that time, I was like, I'm having fun.
Yeah.
And it made me nostalgic, and it made me kind of like, when I see this, I don't watch The Office hardly ever, but when I do see it, I get really, I miss it. I miss the set of The Office.
Steve's performance in the scene is so interesting because he fully denies Andy in a way. It's a breakthrough scene for even his character because we never see him do something like that. And you see how he sort of maintains and carries the tone of the show. Can you remember a story from working on the show or a moment that really captures how great Steve was at playing Michael and how it helped you understand what to do on the show?
Well, I think some of the things that are most memorable with Steve, there were a lot of times when I couldn't keep it together. Like I really would break just doing a one-on-one scene with Steve because there's so much going on in his face.
Yeah.
Like there's pain, sometimes there's real agony, or there's like pathos, sadness, and yet he's saying the silliest thing in the world, and he's saying it so earnestly. Like when Michael Scott was earnest, it was the funniest, saddest thing. And so often I remember, and I had to apologize to Steve for this on numerous occasions, but I couldn't look at his eyes. So I would look at his ear or sometimes his chin or whatever I could, the DP would tell me, like, it's fine if you look, at his right ear, like it'll look normal. Yeah. But I couldn't do the scene looking in his eyes because there's so much going on in those eyes. And then, one of the hardest times I've ever laughed in my life was the scene where Kevin sits on his lap as Santa Claus, when Steve is Santa Claus and Kevin sits on his lap.
There we go. Oh my God.
Oh, that's really comfortable.
Like it's funny, the scene's funny with Kevin on his lap, but then when Kevin gets up, Steve starts like moving around the space because his leg is asleep, and he's like hammering his leg against the desk and then the chair. And I think you can see in the shot that I disappear. Like I duck behind a wall because I can't. And that was probably take 12. And I still couldn't keep it together. And it was the commitment, like that, as one of the things I could just tell Steve was so present, that all of that flailing around with a asleep leg was like, I don't think that was in the script. Like, it's just, you feel like you really were immersed in Michael's world. Yeah. And then you're just reduced to like a fan and you're laughing. The
last line you say in the show is, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. Did you feel that at the time, or did you feel like you did know you were in the good old days while shooting it?
I knew when early on, as soon as I was invited in to become a series regular, I knew I had hit the jackpot and that I was in just an extraordinary situation, like a dream job with dream people doing dream work. So, but even saying that, I didn't understand how amazing it was. Yeah. So like I did appreciate a lot, and I loved it, and I was so thrilled to be there. And I remember driving to work every morning just psyched, so psyched. Like, how much fun do I get to have today with people that I love? And then I think it took some real distance and like grief, truly, of like the end of that chapter of my life, to then be like, oh, no. It was so much more special than you ever realized.
Often at the same time you were shooting The Office, you were shooting the Hangover movies, which is another side of a comedy of repression. It's just a different sort of repression that this character has. Do you remember first talking to the director, Todd Phillips, about the role? What did he see in you for it? What did you see for yourself in it?
Yes, I remember our first lunch talking about it. And I don't remember a whole lot of analysis. It was just sort of like, yeah, we're on the same page. We get this script is so funny, and I couldn't wait to do it. And I was talking about this with someone recently, how I had this vision. I had this like comedy moment in my head that I just really wanted to perform. And all it was the simplest thing. It was just like me and some buddies in a car, out of control, screaming with terror. Like that to me was such a funny. I just wanted to be in a show or a movie or something that manifested that scene.
Yeah.
And here's a script where that happens like 8 times in the movie. And I was like, this is it. I have to do this movie.
Do you guys know if there's gonna be one?
And just from the get-go, it was like, yeah, we're on the same page.
I want to play you another clip. I want to play a scene. It's a scene in which your character is introduced where you give a line reading on 2 things that I think the entire series hinges on. That if you read these lines differently, your character changes. And because your character is the arc you follow, especially for the first 2 movies, the whole movie falls apart.
Wow. All right.
And you'll see it. Well, maybe you'll see it. It might be hard to see in yourself. But for those who haven't seen or don't remember, you play Stu, a dentist, in a very restrictive relationship with Rachel Harris. You're explaining to her that the bachelor party is actually in Napa instead of Las Vegas, which is, of course, a lie.
What is the matter?
I don't know. I just hope you're not going to go to some strip club when you're up there.
Melissa, we're going to Napa Valley. I don't even think they have strip clubs in wine country.
Well, I'm sure if there is one, Phil will sniff it out.
It's not going to be like that. Besides, you know how I feel about that sort of thing.
I know. It's just boys and their bachelor parties. It's gross.
You're right. It is gross.
Not to mention, it's pathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Those places are filthy.
Yeah.
And the worst part is, that little girl grinding and dry humping the fucking stage up there, that's somebody's daughter up there.
up there. I was just going to say that.
See? I just wish your friends were as mature as you.
They are mature, actually. You just have to get to know them better.
The way your face on gross, the sort of way your character has to wrestle with saying that, to me, is the movie. and I watched it. I was like, anyways, well, what do you see when you see that scene?
Well, it's again, I hate to be a broken record, but I'm just like, I just want to be back there having that fun with Rachel Harris. Is so funny. She's such a great comedy actor. And I think we discovered that little moment that we where Stu is like matching her language. I think we discovered that together. It's repression. It's discomfort with, like, I think Stu doesn't like lying. I think he's like not someone who wants to be in a dishonest relationship, but he's kind of like Andy. He doesn't have the right tools to deal with that in an emotionally intelligent way. So that's what you get.
Considering that's where your character's starting from, I'm curious how you approach, in the first 2 movies, the waking up and it's chaos scene, the definitive hangover scene of like we're waking up and a million things are happening. What do you remember about shooting those moments, the moments of waking up and you have to essentially you're getting all the clues for what the movie's going to be?
Well, I do remember before actually shooting it, walking onto the set of the hotel room and just being like, oh my God, our production designer, the props team, like everybody has knocked it out of the park. Like before we're shooting, that whole hotel room was on a stage at Warner Brothers, and it was just like just exploring the set. I loved like the little discoveries of like, random bachelor party evidence everywhere. It was so funny, and I was so thrilled that it looked so good. And as far as the wake up moment goes, I knew that I had a big camera rig like attached to me that was pointing a camera right at my face. So when I first like stand up, you get that weird disorienting kind of like thing where I'm stumbling around and the camera's just on my face. That made me laugh. Like just the idea that, oh, this is gonna be so weird and funny looking. I was like, I better have a good face. Yeah. I better have like the right face. And then I've had a lot of hangovers for real in my life, and so I kind of knew what it feels like, and Thankfully, those days are behind me, but yeah, that was an easy thing to kind of tap into.
The thing you mentioned earlier that you had a desire to play out of control scenes, and I was thinking about you've talked about you were diagnosed later in life with ADHD, and I've actually interviewed many comedians where that is the case, where something about, especially people who start out in live performance, the like intense amount of stimuli that is involved in that is really calming to a sort of ADHD mind. And I was wondering if you think like that is an asset in playing chaotic scenes, where it feels like you feel really oddly at peace in those moments.
I've never thought about that quite in those terms, but I will say I do think that my particular manifestation of ADHD has been a kind of gift in many ways in my job, particularly in the sense of like being hyper focused on a project. So like I get to focus on something for like 2 months and then it's gone, and I get to focus on something else. I have total novelty. But also a film production itself is like novelty almost every day.
Yeah.
You're doing different scenes, you're in different places, and that definitely fuels however my brain works. Yeah, as far as the performance itself and the choice, it's hard to know. Maybe it's why I love it so much. I mean, that would be a very reasonable theory.
You once described the role as physically demanding. I was curious, what was the most physically demanding day on set?
There were a lot of just hot, grueling days outside in basically the desert. Sometimes you're in the city of Vegas, but you're just out on hot days. There's a lot of running in that movie, which, you see a scene that's running, but what you aren't seeing is the 10 or 20 or 10 takes in one camera setup, 10 takes in another camera setup, 10 takes in another camera setup. And then there was a day when we actually, like that handoff scene that's kind of like, looks like a casino scene.
Throw it over. Then I give you Doug.
I'm sorry. First of all, good morning. We didn't catch your name last night.
Mr. Chow. Leslie Chow.
Mr. Chow, it is a pleasure. My name is Stu.
We're actually in the desert. That was punishing. Like the whole crew and the cast was like kind of having to wrap our heads in scarves and kind of get through a lot of windy dust. And the stunts, like some of the stunts we were fully in the car for car chases and like fighting, wrestling. Some of the fight scenes are, again, just take after take.
Yeah.
It's grueling.
What was the single most fun day on set of any of the movies?
Probably in Hangover 2 when we're on Chow's boat and we're just racing up the Chao Phraya River in Bangkok.
Yeah.
And we're just on this giant, fast boat in Bangkok. Like that was so cool. And there was a helicopter pilot. The helicopter, the camera was helicopter mounted. And we had this like French helicopter pilot who was legendary as being like unbelievably good. And so he was doing these insane sweeps around us. We're going like 50 miles an hour in this giant boat, and this helicopter is like swooping over us. Like it felt like a military operation. And we're just like whooping it up on this boat. It was so cool. But the helicopter was like right over our heads, and it was terrifying. That night, Zach got a Snickers bar and mashed it into a pair of tighty whities and had it delivered to the chopper pilot's hotel room as like a thank you for scaring the shit out of us. That was awesome.
What I think is really cool about this time is like you were able to write the songs in the movies. Like it's not normal that a character will be like, oh, we should have singing, and like you get to write it, and it's in your comedic voice, but also the voice of the character. Can you talk about writing those songs and performing those songs and how you approach them, considering this is a type of authorship that is rare for a comedian to get in a big movie like this?
So we were in that hotel room set for days and days, and there's a big, beautiful grand piano. So I would just sit at the piano, plink around, and I can play I'm like an okay piano player. I'm not good, but I would just make up songs about crew members, like, and just kind of roast people like sitting at the piano. And then Todd comes over at a certain point and he's like, we need a little breath in the movie while you guys are waiting for the tiger to get knocked out. So do one of those songs, because those are fun and funny, and that'll just be a really nice moment. And I'm like, great, all right, cool. So what should it be? And he's like, I don't know, like what do tigers dream of? Because we're waiting for the tiger to fall asleep. What do tigers dream of when they take a little tiger snooze? Do they dream of mauling zebras or Halle Berry in her Catwoman suit? And so I'm like, oh, great. And so that was the sort of seed of the idea. And I remember I ran over to another set in the same stage, which was the chapel where we did all the wedding stuff with Heather Graham. That the little chapel had a tiny little upright piano in it. And that's where I sat and wrote that incredibly stupid, silly song. Yeah. And I came back, I played it for Todd. He's like, well, try this, maybe change these words. And we just kind of cracked this really fun and silly song.
Zach Galifianakis said in retrospect, he maybe wishes that he only made the first movie. What do you make of that? How do you feel about that?
Well, that is so Zach. That is such a Zach line. Ever the curmudgeon. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything. Like my sort of analysis of that question is very different from like a fan who might be like, oh, the trilogy lost its way, which maybe it did, but I loved every minute of it, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah.
And I love all three movies. I think what was so special about the first one is how joyful it was. And that was something that we were very consciously adding in. Like, for example, we're the three best friends that anyone could have.
And we're the three best friends that anybody could have. We're the three best friends that anyone could have. We're gonna do things all the time together.
That song was a spontaneous thing while shooting, because it's like, how excited are we? How much have we bonded? Like, what's a silly manifestation of that? What do like buddies do when they're just like joyful and being silly? Those moments bubbled up less and less in 2 and 3. And I missed that. But they're different movies. Yeah. They're like different. We kind of took a different tone, and that was a deliberate choice.
All three of you, Zach, Bradley Cooper, and you, all seem to have a sort of fame hangover after the third movie, which is just sort of you all reckoned with the type of career you wanted to have after being in a phenomenon, a true phenomenon that essentially we have not seen, especially in comedy movies, since. Can you talk about what it was like for you and how it made you rethink how you wanted to have your career?
I think it was the scale, the sudden jump in the like scale of fame. Mm-hmm. It just was massive. And I don't think I was fully emotionally prepared for that. I was totally prepared for the work. I was totally prepared for everything involved in making the movie. I don't think I was ready for being like a movie star. I just didn't have the sort of tools for that. Ultimately, I have such a positive take on all of it.
And did it influence how you thought about how you approached your career afterwards?
Yeah. So there was probably, I didn't quite understand being right at this sort of like nuclear hot center of that phenomenon. Mm-hmm. I don't think I appreciated its scale. I don't think I really understood the power that it gave me as a figure in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. I still felt like somebody trying to prove myself, which in some ways is good, but in some ways was a very inaccurate reading of the situation, and I think held me back in some ways that I just wish I had kind of owned it a little bit more and had a better kind of sense of. But you know what? I did my best.
Yeah,
I really tried. I tried my best. I worked with the tools I had at the time.
What's amazing to think about the Hangover movies is how much money they made, especially considering now that essentially no comedy movies get released in theaters, or very, very few.
Sure.
I was wondering, what do you take as a person who still makes comedy movies? What do you take of the state of film comedy?
I mean, I think there are still amazing comedies being made, but I miss the kind of like high drama of like big studio production on a comedy. And when I say high drama, I just mean like the stakes are high, but also the investment is high. So like it's you're getting all the whistles and bells on your production. You're getting the best gear, you're getting the best lighting packages, you're getting the best trailers for downtime, all that stuff. That just makes the whole thing. It's what, as a kid, if you fantasize about being in movies, like it delivered on those things. These are big studio movies, and they're fun just because they're big studio movies. And then if the script is good and the cast is good, well, that's just like more fun. That's kind of a shallow thing to like value or put value on. But I can say with honesty, like that stuff was fun. It was fun to feel part of something that as a kid you fantasized about, or as like whenever I'm on a studio lot and I see those the tourist trams drive by, I'm always struck every time. Still to this day, I see those trams drive by and I'm like, people think this is cool. Like people want to ogle at this job that I get to do and like be in movies. And I used to be someone who only got to ogle, and now I get to be in it and in the middle of it. And how cool is that?
Yeah.
And the more things get scaled down and comedies get shrunk in the scale of the production and so forth, it's still an unbelievable gift to get to be a part of it. It's still fun as hell. Like the craft of like trying to make something as funny as possible is still like one of the greatest thrills of my life. But just some of those extra little whistles and bells, those you miss those.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your podcast, SNAFU,
Please.
a podcast
Yes,
I
thank you.
really enjoy. And unlike basically any other movie star, television actor, celebrity in your situation looking to start a podcast, you did not do something built around your own celebrity and with you talking every day with a friend or whatever. And instead, you completely avoided that trope entirely, and you landed on SNAFU, which is a deeply researched podcast about events in history.
Man, I loved the 80s. Arcade games, fanny packs, acid wash jeans, Jane Fonda doing jazzercise. I mean, what's not to like?
Smiling and feeling so fine.
Oh, yeah. The looming threat of nuclear war.
Can you talk about what made you avoid doing a podcast completely centered around sort of your fun friends and you or whatever? And how did you land on SNAFU?
There was a moment where podcasts were obviously exploding. They still are. And I think all of us in show business were kind of like wondering, well, where do I fit into this? Do I fit into it? Is there some? And so I just started to kind of think about that. And I realized pretty quickly that I just didn't want to be another interview show. I just felt like it was a little bit of a crowded space. So then it's like, well, okay, what can I do? Well, I went to college with this buddy of mine, Jad Abumrad, who had made Radiolab.
Yeah, wow.
Rainbows. Okay, so we're going to start today with author James Glick.
As I recall, you wanted to talk about Isaac Newton.
That's right.
We did call him to talk about Isaac Newton, but more specifically, colors.
All right, Isaac Newton, he's 23 years old.
1665.
And he's home for the holidays. No, there's no holiday. He's home for the plague.
There was actually a plague. They sent everybody home from school. In any case, he's in his room, famously solving all these mysteries of the world. And one of the questions that he thinks about during this break is,
what are colors? Where do they come from?
I've always just thought Radiolab was an incredibly special thing. And I thought, well, is there something I can do in that space? Well, I've always loved like learning crazy specific things in history. And maybe we can bring sort of that style of storytelling that Jad is so brilliant at into the history space. But I want it to be funny as a comedian. So like, what are the funny things in history? Well, the Screwups, the SNAFUs. Those are like the train wrecks of history that you can't turn away from. And especially if there's some distance, that tragedy plus time equals comedy. So that's how I was able to kind of mash up these things I loved.
Yeah. They're all great, but my favorite was the second season.
Which is the least funny, I would say.
It's definitely the one you're most passionate in. There's one episode where I'm like, you really are mad at the Vietnam War.
That's funny.
Can you explain the plot of that season for those who haven't listened and how you approach the story?
Okay, sure. Yeah. So it's 1971. The Vietnam War is peaking. The anti-war movement is peaking. Civil rights protests are bursting. It's a very volatile cultural moment. At the same time, a lot of activists, both in civil rights and anti-war spaces, are feeling the weight of harassment and surveillance and some just like flagrant abuse by the FBI. Now, this is J. Edgar Hoover's FBI, which we now know was a catastrophe of malfeasance. But at the time, J. Edgar Hoover was still a national hero. And so if you're a person that feels like the FBI is breaking all kinds of laws and you want to do something about it, who do you turn to? There's nowhere to turn. So this group of activists in Philadelphia decided to break into a FBI office in Media, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. And they staged this elaborate heist at phenomenal personal risk to themselves and their families. And they managed to break into an FBI office, steal all the files, and then they start to leak these files to and they pour through the files and they find evidence of malfeasance, and they package these up and they send them to a bunch of senators and journalists, and thinking like this is going to blow up. Only one journalist had the courage to actually start to publish these things, and it was Betty Metzger, who was a young reporter at the Washington Post. This is before the Pentagon Papers. It's before Watergate. So there's really no blueprint for that. She starts to publish these files. It leads to this massive exposure of how corrupt J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI are. It leads to the exposure of COINTELPRO, which was this like horrifically illegal program of abuse and surveillance and just an annihilation of civil liberties of U.S. citizens, none of whom had committed crimes or were even suspected of crimes. They just were political enemies of, Nixon or J. Edgar Hoover or whoever. So this then leads to the Church hearings, the Frank Church hearings, who was a courageous senator from Idaho. And in the Church hearings, it leads to it's the only reason we now have any congressional oversight over all of these intelligence agencies, the NSA, the CIA, the FBI. It was a sea change and an incredible thing. And they were never caught. The burglars were never caught. But they eventually were revealed once the FBI closed their investigation. Some of them came forward, and more of them came forward. We got in touch with Betty Metzger and forged a relationship, and she trusted us. She introduced us to the burglars, and we tell their story. And they tell their story in the podcast. And they're not all still with us, but the ones that are agreed to talk with us, and it's incredibly moving for so many reasons. Their heroism, their courage, their sacrifice, and also what they accomplished. And it's something that's largely forgotten. I think it was very quickly overshadowed by the Pentagon Papers, and then of course Watergate, which were massive, also tectonic moments in American political history. But this was as consequential and needs more attention.
Yeah, I think in the second season, there's a moment where it's clear you do the interview, and I was shocked. I couldn't believe, nothing against you. It's just sort of, I would not think the celebrity host of the podcast would actually like be reporting, doing the interviews, and you were. And it just it seems like a lot of work. And I don't put this is not that I thought you were lazy. There's a certain perception of
in full candor, like it was a shared process. We have an amazing team on the SNAFU podcast, and lots of the interviews were done by some 100%. Of those producers. I did a few, and these stories are told with humor, but they're not necessarily commentary. You mostly sort of tell the stories as they are. That said, there is this theme of the second season I thought was really interesting, which is sort of, what does it really take to be an activist? Or what does activism mean? I was thinking about it, especially in terms of, as a person who works at the Daily Show, at a time where people were just starting to be like, the Daily Show, they're our number one journalists, they're our number one people at the front lines, and blah, blah, blah. And I want to know, from telling that story, what did you learn about activism? What did you want to communicate? Well, I think that that these activists in season 2 of SNAFU really make a compelling case for civil disobedience in the face of catastrophic breakdown of our institutions. And that's really hard. And that's really scary, right? And we're in a moment right now where it would appear some of our institutions are losing independence. They're becoming political weapons. The DOJ, the FBI. Weirdly, it's kind of reassuring to know that the FBI was even worse than it is now and got better. And hopefully it won't get as bad as it was. It's scary. It's a weird moment for sure. And it might be worse under the hood than, it probably is worse than we know. I just think it's a lesson in civil courage and also the power of a small group of committed people to make an incredible difference. Another aspect I love about the story of these burglars is that none of them were professional criminals. They were only passionate activists who wanted America to live up to its promise. And that was their motivation. Their motivation wasn't to like go get some diamonds and fence them for $1 million. It was to do the right thing. So what set them apart from someone else that might be committing a heist is they had phenomenal discipline, and they never spoke of their crime to anyone. No burglar does that. Like criminals brag. Yeah. These guys never broke, which is incredible.
Had you gotten offers to write a book before the SNAFU book?
I'd been approached a number of times, about different kinds of books, memoirs, or just kind of essay collections. And I'd entertained a couple of them and thought about some different kind of essay ideas that I could put together. But I just also have been fortunate to be very busy in my showbiz career, and I just didn't get very far. Yeah. As the SNAFU podcast really found its voice and the mechanism of making the show and creating the show and the sort of building of this phenomenal team of people began to crystallize, it just was like, oh, this is a book. Yeah. This is definitely a book. It's going to be so fun to make. It's going to be funny, and I can endow it with comedy topspin and hopefully some meaningful insight and also just historical education about history, which is always good.
There are a lot of wild stories in this book, but there's one that I've told every single person I've met since I've read the book. They're like, what are you working on? It's like, I'm about to interview Ed Helms. He has this book. There's one story I need to tell you about, which is essentially the story where America considered blowing up the moon.
Doesn't that sound like you just pitched a Looney Tunes cartoon?
You can immediately imagine the image of a moon blowing up, but
it's 100% true. Yeah. Okay, so it's the 1950s. The Cold War is really heating up, and America wants to flex its nuclear muscles. And someone hatches the brilliant idea to detonate a nuclear missile on the moon. the thinking is that everyone can see the moon. So if we can, blow up a bomb up there, everyone will see it and they'll be like, oh my God, America is so badass. It's like fourth grade logic, this is, there's no consideration for the moon itself. The moon just becomes this object of like, maybe we can use it to prove ourselves to the Soviets. And they get pretty far down the road trying to plan this thing. And Carl Sagan is in the loop. A young Carl Sagan, right out of grad school, is part of the team analyzing the feasibility of this. What they eventually realized, thank God, is that any minor miscalculation or rocket malfunction of any sort could very easily result in the missile slingshotting around the moon's gravitational field and just flying right back to Earth and hitting God knows where. The other realization was that even if they hit the target and detonated and made a nuclear explosion on the surface of the moon, it would probably just result in a big gray dust cloud. It would not be the sort of like fear, awe-inspiring moment that they craved. So let alone even necessarily be observable by the naked eye. So it was scrapped, thank God, but a lot of resources went into it and a lot of time and energy.
Reading that, and there's a few other stories, there's a thing that story and a lot of stories of the book, and it's a thing I keep on thinking about with the podcast, which is the saying, never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. And in a time where like conspiracy theories are thrown around a lot, this book is filled with largely like times where people were like largely being stupid more than they were like accurately trying to like take over the world. And their stupidity also sometimes prevented them from being able to do those type of things. I was curious, what do you make of this divide of the maliciousness of those in power and the sort of stupidity of those in power that sort of might appear as full-on evil or whatever?
Do you mean in this current moment or in these stories?
I think these stories apply to sort of, because I guess it's a question of like, what is your then takeaway of the people who think the government is constantly pulling strings to like put down the common man or whatever, like, and so it definitely applies in this current moment. But I think this book has a lot of examples where it's unclear the sort of moral goals of these people, but like a lot of things that are happening were just sort of them falling over themselves.
Sure. Well, I think it's instructive that these things have happened before. Yeah. And that, we were talking about J. Edgar Hoover. Like, to me, that is a incredibly powerful echo of the current moment, or the current moment is an echo of that. It can be looked at as instructive. But yeah, these insane, it's a great lesson in groupthink, in sort of closed bubble thinking. Clearly, a lot of these things, and a lot of people I've talked to have made the very astute point that there were clearly no women involved in these decisions. For sure. These were very male ideas, which I think is both funny and tragic. Question your institutions, right? And like, try to hold them accountable. Also question your sources for information. That will hopefully sort of guide you away from conspiracy theories. But definitely question institutions. Hold them accountable.
You said that when there were times when you were working at The Daily Show from 2002 to 2006, that you'd be interviewing people jokingly, but you wanted to do journalism. Like you had part of you that just wanted to do it. Can you think of an example?
Here's a crazy one. I did a story called Guns for Tots.
Guns for Tots is teaching kids about the joys of weaponry in a neighborhood that needs it most. Why Harlem?
Why not Harlem? Sometimes, you have to reach out to the people who could appreciate it a little more.
And who needs familiarity with firearms more than kids in Harlem?
That was the name of a program that this really weird dude who was a staunch civil libertarian basically was saying, like, you're violating my civil rights by mandating that I can't have toy guns available for my children. And so he started a drive, Guns for Tots, as a kind of like snarky protest there was some movement. I think some school district was saying like no more gun toys at school, at their school or something. So yeah, Guns for Tots became this protest that he was doing. We of course jumped at that, and of course the Daily Show angle. You always at the Daily Show, the formula is you just take the side of the biggest idiot, and then you like sort of fiercely bias and skew your segment in their favor, resulting in satire.
Sure.
So, so in this case, of course, I take his side, like Guns for Tots. What a brilliant, what a brilliant idea, a brilliant form of protest to these unreasonable people that want to take gun toys away from children. And I'm sitting there interviewing this guy, and he's a civil libertarian, and he's actually very intelligent. And I'm thinking like, I have to play this game where I'm just pretending to agree with you, and I'm making jokes, and I'm kind of snarking with you. And I'm actually also kind of trying to make you seem as foolish as you candidly are in a satirical, fun way. So there's a game to this entire interaction, and I can't break the game.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that's like, you are a fascinating, weird person, and I actually really want to pick your brain. Why in the hell could you possibly think Guns for Tots is like a reasonable endeavor or even a reasonable way to get your point across? There were so many moments like that where I'd be talking to someone who might have a really strange or insanely unreasonable point of view, and I just wanted to dig into that and understand it better, but I couldn't.
Yeah,
it would break the satirical game.
So what is it like now to make a show that is comedic, but you get to interview people as a journalist might, or just get to ask the questions you would like to ask them? Obviously, you're not interviewing congressmen, hard-hitting, but it's still like you get to flex that part of you that had that instinct.
Yes, and I would say that part of me was just genuine curiosity, and yes, that's a really fun thing to chase sometimes.
How do you then approach a book version? What is sort of the tonal way of trying to tell these stories in a way that is fun, but ultimately still truth forward?
Sure. The book, the podcast is a deep dive into things. This is a sort of a survey, 31 different snafus. It's a very easy book to just pick up, thumb through, find a fun chapter, and read in 15 minutes. It's a great sort of like nightstand, beach, even I dare say bathroom read. And in that way, it's very different from the podcast, which is so immersive and unless I guess you do the audiobook, in which case it sort of takes the shape of a podcast.
A lot of short episodes.
Yeah.
Like mini episodes.
Exactly. It's like mini SNAFU episodes. Yes, that's it's divided up into decades, roughly 5 or 6 snafus per decade. And yeah.
Now it's time for the final segment of the show. It's called the Laughening Round. It's like a lightning round, but it's laughing because it's a comedy podcast. Do you have a favorite joke? Like a street joke, dad joke, etc.?
I just heard a joke from my daughter that I love. Why did the chicken cross the playground?
Why?
To get to the other slide.
Still iterating on that joke all these years later.
I also heard a hot take on the original joke.
Sure.
Which kind of scares the hell out of me. Why did the chicken cross the road?
Why?
To get to the other side. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you?
The other side of the road, but what is the side they're on?
The other side of the road, and why is that funny? Because it's so mundane and stupid and silly. What if the chicken is crossing the road to deliberately get hit by a car and get to the other side?
That is good. Do you have advice for an aspiring actor, writer, comedian?
Surround yourself with like-minded people that love comedy, and they will inspire you, and you will inspire them.
What is your favorite office cold open?
Probably the I forget what it's called. The one where we do the song. No. everybody, it's this grand choreography oneer.
Yeah.
Where with the camera moving through the whole thing. And that was glorious.
Do you have a story that you remember from your week hosting Saturday Night Live?
Yeah. So my opening monologue was sort of pulled from a story I used to tell in stand-up. And we were sitting around, I remember just hanging out with all the writers and just kind of spitballing like different ideas for my opening monologue. And there were a lot of great ideas. But then John Mulaney was like, hey, I remember seeing you do stand-up like 10 or 15 years ago. Like, because it had been a while since I had even done stand-up. And you told this story about being obsessed with baton twirling. And it was a really funny story. Do you remember that? And I was like, yeah, I remember that. And so we kind of worked on it, and I dug it out of the recesses of my brain, and that became my opening monologue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have a short story of an interaction with a legendary comedian, living or dead, you're willing to share?
Yes. So when I was first doing stand-up here in New York City, I was a regular at this place, the Boston Comedy Club, which has been gone for a long time. But it was right on 3rd Street in the Village, right below Washington Square Park. And it was a dive. Like, it was a dump of a comedy club. And it was not where the great comedy people frequented. Great comedians came in and out of there, but it wasn't like the Comedy Cellar where, like, it had a high bar. I hosted a lot of shows at the Boston Comedy Club, and I worked the door there a lot. And one night, it's a regular night at the Boston Comedy Club, which means there's probably 20 people in the audience, maybe 30 people. It's kind of quiet, and in walks George Carlin. Just like nonchalantly kind of comes up the stairs and kind of peeks his head in. And I was so stunned, and I just said, Mr. Carlin, it's such an honor to have you here. Like, can I put you up on stage? What can I do? He said, I just want to sit in the back. And I said, great. And I showed him to a table, and he sat in the back, and he just watched. And I felt sort of touched by greatness somehow.
What is the best time you ever bombed in your time doing stand-up or doing improv? Or the time you bombed and you'll never forget it, but kind of in a glorious way?
Okay, so I was doing a ton of stand-up and improv, and then I got the Daily Show job. And I was so psyched to have the Daily Show job. What landing on a TV show gave me was a ton more stand-up opportunities. What it also did was monopolize my time. So I couldn't stay in the stand-up trenches and keep doing stand-up. But suddenly I have these great stand-up opportunities.
Sure.
And it took me, I didn't quite understand that that's not compatible. So I accepted a couple of big stand-up gigs out of the gate. One was at Mohegan Sun, the casino in Connecticut, headlining. Like, I'd never gotten a headlining offer before. But now I'm like Ed Helms from The Daily Show. I get a headlining spot at Mohegan Sun. I don't think I'd ever even done an hour set before, or the 45 minutes, whatever was required. So I go, I get up there, my friend is opening for me, and it's a huge cavernous theater, and it's all banquette seating. So it doesn't, you can't hear the laughs. It's a dead room. And I think the turnout on opening night was good. Like, they publicized, like, people just go to the shows at casinos, there was a pretty good audience, but I couldn't hear them. I couldn't hear them laughing. I had no idea, like, what the dynamic was with the audience. I'm sort of like 10 minutes in, I'm like panicking, and I'm stumbling over my material. I just have a terrible night. And I'm like, okay, I still have 3 nights or whatever, 3 more shows. I'll get it back. The next morning, there's Mohegan Sun had like a little newspaper that they put under all the guests' doors. And somebody had written a review of my show and put it under every guest's door. And it's like Ed Helms from The Daily Show had a rough night on stage. And it just was. I was like, "What are you doing? This is you're the one selling tickets, and then you're condemning me to just doom." So yeah, that was not a good moment. And after that, I was like, I gotta just focus on my job. I'm lucky to have this Daily Show job. That I'm all in on that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We did it.
We did
the
it.
end.
We did it.